Hello again. This is a magical and inspiring return to interviews with a man who is of the bravest of hearts I've ever had the pleasure of knowing. Bob McKenna operates the Clubhouse on Highland, an elegant wedding destination in Southside Birmingham, which, we come to find out, also serves as a nexus of loving and expansive endeavors of all kinds during the week. Bob has worked as a clinical psychologist, and according to an unbiased review of one of his wedding clients, is a prince of a man, a sentiment which I will enthusiastically second. In this interview, we talk of struggle, compassion, our pervasive curiosity and hope for the future, and how to form a business and a life around the mission of love. Book your wedding or art show or function of any sweet kind at the Clubhouse on Highland, with links in the description of this podcast. Music for this episode comes courtesy of my bill mates at the Nick back in March, the esteemed Polly Panic of Asheville and Polly Action of Austin. Murder of Jane Crow also joined us, and you can hear all about their work on our own episode 27. First is Polly Action with their eponymous song, recorded live at DZ Studios outside of Chicago in Hickory Hills, Illinois. After the interview, we'll ride out the feelings with Polly Panic's Cellomonium in the track Purpose. Thank you for listening as we rejoin you in the interview room at last. To progress, to purpose, to the future. Semper Paratus. Welcome back to the Earth Hotel. See you back in the lobby on Sunday. This is not live, and it won't be untouched, so don't be nervous. So you do weekend weddings and services out of the Clubhouse on Highland, and then yoga and dance and social change and proactivist events, hijinks, all the other times. What is that like? How did you get into that?
Yes. So the premise initially was to create a center of love and consciousness. Mm-hmm. And when I was living in California prior to moving to Birmingham, I was introduced to some great places. One was Harbin Hot Springs. It was a clothing optional hot spring in Northern California, north of Calistoga, north of Napa Valley. And just great conversations happening there, healing. Just, you really felt like you're hanging out with Adam and Eve. It was just like the built world just kind of dissipated and everybody was their authentic self, mm-hmm. which is a wonderful feeling if you've never had it before, to just be like, wow, everything is new and fresh and people have dropped their ego at the door and stepped into this nirvana. Mm-hmm. So anyway, that was a enlightening time. And then there's another place in California called Esalen, Esalen. It was named after the Esalen Native American tribe that lived on the coast, on the Pacific coast, and they lived in this cliff area, and it had a hot spring pouring. It was like a hot spring waterfall. So you can imagine how it was considered a sacred space with hot water, a hot shower in the morning just coming from Mother Nature.
Right.
And Esalen has developed into a health and wellness center where people come from all over the world to discuss everything from spirituality to physics to the cosmos to sexuality to yoga to organic farming. Really anything about, I guess, that would be in the line with the human potential movement, helping people achieve their own personal fulfillment.
Yes.
So anyway, being inspired by Harbin, being inspired by Esalen made me think of the idea of, hey, I would like to create a place like that too, because the more places in the world that offer that, the better. So I found myself in Birmingham because I was interested in mind, body, spirit, harmony, and I wanted to offer that to people in kind of an urban format. Mm-hmm. So a lot of people are not going to buy a ticket and go to California and go to a hot spring and commune with other people. So I thought, well, why not bring it to where the people are?
Why Birmingham?
So Birmingham was not on my radar at all. I was raised in Massachusetts. I moved out to California because I had a spinal cord injury when I was 30. I'm sorry, I've had it for 30 years when I was 23. And so after dealing with the snow and ice in New England, I thought, if I'm going to develop a career, I'd rather do it in a place where I don't have to shovel a path to my car and then defrost the ice off of my windshield before I even drive to work in the morning.
Right.
So I thought, let me try out California, and went out there, loved it. But it's a very transient state. People are coming in and out of California a lot. It's rare that you meet someone in California that's from California. And so I just didn't have that hometown feeling that I grew up with in Massachusetts. And then I researched rehabilitation in America, and it turns out that one of the larger rehabilitation hospitals in America was based out of Birmingham. So I came here and I interviewed, and they asked me to be on their team. And so I moved here to work in Birmingham and develop, basically the concept was to develop physical therapy in a gym, which people are doing now, but 17 years ago they weren't.
Was that a hospital setting before that?
Yeah, exactly. People would go into a hospital setting, they would do outpatient therapy, and then basically they were left to rot in their houses. I mean, most people aren't motivated to go to a gym. So the idea was, if they were doing their rehab with physical therapists in a gym, after their rehab ended, they would be used to going to the gym, and they would be more likely to continue going back there because they were comfortable and familiar. I mean, for most people like me, you don't think of going to a gym because you think that's where the healthy people go. So if you're trying to become healthy, you're kind of embarrassed to go in there when everybody else is buff and running on tracks, and you're like, where do I begin? So
right.
Introducing them to that at the time where they're recovering from an injury would be a good way to make them feel at home. And there was a whole program around it. It wasn't just physical therapy in a gym. The idea was to teach people how to eat organic, locally sourced food, eat with the seasons, how to be in harmony with the earth, take some time for contemplation throughout their day to understand the cosmos and where their place is in the cosmos and what they really are, and that they're much more than their situation and their what they've been told they are by society. It's just so much more vast than most people have ever been introduced to.
Right.
So anyway, that was the idea. So Birmingham, I came here for a job, and then felt like if I was going to create what I wanted to create, I needed to do it myself. I couldn't ask for permission. I just had to kind of claim it myself.
Right.
And so this big old house in Southside Birmingham, Alabama presented itself, and I kind of just took a big inhale and said, okay, I'm going to do it, and jumped into it on a wing and a prayer. And somehow I've managed to keep it going for 15 years. It's
gorgeous. It's ornate and covered in mirrors and wood, and you've kept it immaculate. I don't know enough about architecture. Do you know what kind of building it is? It's a big damn house. Yes.
The style is arts and crafts, and people call this fine arts and crafts because of the materials. It's kind of over the top. So I think the fineness is the exquisite materials that they used in the tile around the front door, in the mahogany woodwork, and some of the detail carving on the side, on the staircase. But in general, I think people feel like it's a really loving, warm structure.
Yeah.
It's grand, but it's casual at the same time. You feel like you can put your feet up, but it also feels special.
Yeah. A lot of these places can be very cold. You don't feel like you want to sit down anywhere or touch anything. And you don't feel like, it's not a punk house where you abuse things, because that's the nature, but you do feel at home, and that it is a very special place. The Top Shelf Burlesque just did a show at the beginning of April here that you so graciously helped us put on. And before that, previously, last year, Kinematica was the event run by Danielle Elizabeth. This year was Inherent Rhythm, and that happened shortly afterwards. And both times that place filled up with people and moved, and having people front, back, in and out, and coming up and down the stairs, it doesn't feel like a packed, cold space. You know, it doesn't feel like you schlepped a bunch of people into a Holiday Inn conference room and there, you know, everyone filled the space, and it is very warm. I think you accomplished what you wanted to do.
Well, it's interesting. I kind of feel like a hermit crab. I never knew this, but when we were kids, we used to try and catch hermit crabs. They'd be kind of crawling along the surface of where the waves crashed on the beach. And the interesting thing about hermit crabs is that they take over an existing shell. They don't make the shell themselves. So, and then as they grow, they'll leave one shell and they'll just find a bigger shell. And so I feel like a hermit crab in the sense that someone else built this shell and I've come in temporarily, you know, within this point in my life to inhabit it. And, you know, someday I'll leave and somebody else will come into this and use the shell. But the house itself was built by a couple who were pioneering families that came down here from South Carolina with a mule and a wagon and farmed in the area. One of them was a descendant of the Jones family, which Jones Valley was named after. And the other was from the Smith family, and the Smith Field is in the West End, and it was literally Smith's Field where they farmed. Now it's developed residential area and kind of spans out toward Birmingham Southern College. But so Molly Smith married William Brown, and they started a department store. I'm sorry, they did start a department store, but they started a general store when they were first married for the farmers in the area, and that grew to be the first department store in Birmingham. And then they built this house when they were 65 and 70, and they called it Rest Haven. They wanted to retire here, and they asked their architect to build a home for constant entertainment.
Wow.
And so the scale and the flow of the house is really to entertain. It wasn't built to raise a family in.
Yeah. It feels that way. It's tough to imagine a residential furniture and everything. And similar to the places that you mentioned in California, you did latch onto something that could be not bastardized, but used for less than, you know, like you said, the potential. That's the most you want to do with any kind of property, really, is leave it better than you found it and use it to cultivate things. And that's the difference between us and hermit crabs, is that we don't instill. I don't know the inner life of hermit crabs or their abilities. I don't know, but we have the special ability to instill magic in the walls of places. And I mean, this place was built out of love and for welcoming and entertaining and connection by people that really sacrificed and built something for the betterment of the people around them, and then continued to give back when they could have, you know, walled themselves up and been old and crappy. That's amazing.
Yes. A lot of people have come here and said, I just feel like there's so much love in this place. And the Browns themselves, I've read articles about them, and I've heard stories through historians, and also their great and great-great-grandchildren still live in the Birmingham area. And they had a reputation of being one of the most loved couples in Birmingham because they were very generous and kind and threw great parties and were fun. They used to let their grandchildren ride their tricycles inside the house on rainy days and do figure eights going in and out of the sunroom and the buffet room and the front hall. And they were farmers, so they grew up in houses that you lived in a house. A house was a house to use, to live in. And so I think when they built this grand structure with such fine details, they were never people who tiptoed around a polished brass doorknob. They just used it to open up a door. It was a functional place. So they lived in it and they had a lot of love. And I'd like to think that they're smiling, knowing that the house is being used to its full capacity. And with the premise of love, I really have put love first.
Right.
And, you know, what is love? Who knows? I mean, it's just pretty amorphous. But I would say you try to live outside of your comfort zone and to serve others. I think that's one way of describing love. And so I found that, you know, you can have a big place, but how do you sustain it? And I think a lot of nonprofits and other, whether it's Harbin Hot Spring or Esalen, I always get letters saying, can you support us? Because it's hard sustaining any property.
Right.
And so the formula it started out with, but it really took its own shape, was to host rehearsal dinners and weddings on Fridays and Saturdays, so that Sunday through Thursday I could give back to the community and host things at no cost, or sometimes I'm actually sponsoring something, and then other times just offering something at a very low rate just to cover the cleaning. But it's I describe it as breath, just inhale and exhale. So
very long exhale.
Yeah, if you inhaled all the time, you would die. If you exhaled all the time, you would die. You have to have a constant pattern of inhale and exhale. So by receiving the funds from the events on Fridays and Saturdays, and then giving Sunday through Thursday, and then receiving again on the weekend, it seems like we've reached some sort of sustainable pattern. And it's not bulletproof, but I'm able to do it. I'm not married. I don't have kids. I don't have the responsibilities that a lot of people do. So when I need to, I can tighten my belt and eat peanut butter and jelly sandwiches to get through so I can cover the mortgage. And then, windfall can come the next month. So I'm uniquely positioned to be flexible.
I guess you're not making yourself the center of it, but you serve as a kind of connective hub for a lot of different interests. What's been the breadth of what you put on here, and what is it like having so many types of people interact here?
I know it might sound kind of canned, but because I certainly didn't come up with it, but really just being of service. So like letting, serving. I always tell people that I'm their butler, because in a lot of ways I am, just coordinating, making sure I smooth everything out, make sure that it's effortless for them. But I'm 55 now, and I think I'm at a point where I realize you have to give back. Like, you spend a period of time sometimes in your life accumulating things, or feeling like, am I safe? Do I have a little money in the bank? Can I cover my expenses? And I can't say that I'm really there yet, but at the same time, I feel like the joy of life is to give. I didn't coin the phrase, but just to live to give. And so using my light body, or my physical self in this form right now, to serve and be a vessel of love, I found to be like the greatest joy.
Right.
And it doesn't mean that I don't have to cook 3 meals a day for myself, and that I don't have responsibilities, but to choose to be of service when I wake up in the morning, it relieves me of all of that pressure that I still do have, which is that grocery list of things I have to do,
right?
Or banknotes that I have to pay, or contractors I have to contact to fix things, and other commitments that I may have made. It doesn't make those go away, but you have to have a leading principle to live by. And so when I do feel lost, or don't know where I'm going to put my next step, I just say, take a deep breath and just come from a place of love, and it'll work out.
Yeah, it's shocking how often you'll have the answer if you just ask yourself the question, sit and listen, and have compassion for whatever's going to come out, and not throttle, that down. You don't seem like a guy burdened by responsibilities, or, you run a business, you output more than you increase situations, but you don't seem like a guy that is a burdened, nexus of calls coming in all the time and yelling and fist bump, on the desk. And we spoke yesterday setting this up, and I said, you're a busy guy. And you said, no, I'm stupid busy. You're not inwardly like, there's no beehive in there. Yeah, because you do that flowing in and out. You don't seem to take it on in any personal way. Like, I'm I'm the guy, you know how valuable my time is. I'm the guy that's here doing this. There's none of that. And that's such the critic, because you do put the love first. That's the critical difference. And it's so easily missed as a strategy.
I had a friend that I met when I was living out in California, and she was a yoga teacher. She was a mother. She was a wife. She was a friend. She just leader in her community and just had her act together. Mm-hmm. And I asked her, what's your foundation? Like, what do you go back to when you're elated, you're really happy and celebrating something, or you're stressed out, you're in traffic, or there's a tragedy that happens? Like, what do you go back to center yourself? Like, what's your foundation? What's your grounding? And she said it was her breath. And I remember thinking, what cockamamie, like, what are you talking about? And, here I am talking about it 35 years later. And it just going back to your breath and realizing, are you taking short breaths, or can you take a long, calming breath? And whether we take life and fill it with all of our kind of egocentric thoughts, it's all breath. I mean, we rotate into a star's light every day. We rotate out of it. The cosmos is swirling. It's all breath. So, there are rhythms. There's undulations and vibrations and peaks and valleys. So, when you kind of surrender to that and you enjoy the flow of the river rather than trying to cling on to every rock that you're going past, I think it's a better quality of life. So I've just chosen that. I've done it the other way.
Right.
And it doesn't give me anything but angst. So I just thought, I do want to do my best. I do want to serve. I want to be there as a friend to other people. I want to show up for myself. But if I mess up, I think I can deal with it.
Yeah.
And people have to know that. And I think people figure out pretty quickly when we work together that I don't want to create undue stress. And so just drop the drama and let's take care of whatever we need to take care of.
Right. And that's incredibly valuable. That's a balm to a great many things, especially when you're dealing with, I haven't had a wedding here, but I can't imagine the relief that you must bring to the people involved, just because I've seen you solve problems and doing events, and, I've seen you kind of at work, and it is a feat to handle all these different people palatably and humanely and with real born compassion,
I see people stop in their tracks when they're over here planning a wedding and they're asking about tables and chairs and linens and flowers and a band and the caterer and invitations and the timing of things. And I tell them, take a deep breath and focus on the love. You two are celebrating your love together. And your friends are going to come regardless of whether you make a different choice in your hors d'oeuvre or the color of your flowers, or whether your dress fits or it doesn't fit. It's like they're here to celebrate your love. And it really stops them in their tracks. And they're like, no one said that to us. We got so caught up in the process. And you can almost see through the process, if people aren't focusing on their love, where they're almost scared that the other one is behaving or making choices about silly things and getting so uptight about it. Because if that's the direction the relationship's going in,
right,
it can scare a young person to say, wait, I thought we were in love and now we're arguing over hors d'oeuvres,
right,
that we're going to serve guests in house town. We don't even know them. They're friends of our parents, so I try and get people to focus on what's important, who they are. And if they don't know who they are, just take a little time to think about it. Because the interesting thing about love, and it can be a friendship, it can be a new friendship, it can be old friendships, but everything is dynamic. You're either growing together or you're growing apart. And whenever you feel like something's stagnant, that's just like, oh, okay, like, yeah, my relationship's good, like everything's okay. You're usually actually growing apart at that point, because you can feel it in your heart when you're growing together. So like even in this interview, like we know each other, but I feel like we're growing together. Like it's exciting
it's active.
to do this, do an interview together and to be vulnerable and to share and to talk about new ideas and hopes and dreams, there's a quickening in your heart, which is exciting. It's the creative process. It's the process of love, and it's a joy to be a part of. So when people come here and they're doing an event, I like to remind them that that's the essence. That's the place to be.
Right.
Some people call it a God space. Some people call it a spiritual space. Some people call it love. But it comes back to that idea of breath, which is like when you take a breath, it centers you into right now. Like right now, you're in this body. You have a heart that's pumping blood throughout your system. And just to tune into that is really an ecstatic thing. And we tend to forget it and think, oh, I've got to run here and there and get to the post office before it closes. And it can get pretty perverse.
Yeah.
Where you start twisting things and make something important when it's not.
Right. Yeah. And that not many people will say those kinds of things to a bride and groom in the process of getting everything organized. Unfortunately, that, or in most businesses or most commercial situations. But yeah, that shows that when they get here and they kind of put the brakes on and you allow them that pause, or you help them cultivate that understanding of what they're actually doing here. There are all these chances before that of all the people, the florists and their parents and all these people in the process that didn't say that. The florist didn't put love first either. You introduce that late in the process and it saves the whole endeavor from the foundation, the inside out, like you were saying. Mm-hmm. And that's transformative. I think that's amazing. Mm-hmm. You spoke about earlier, you used to be caught up in the hustle and the franticness. Juliana told me, and I met you through her and her friend Parker, who I've got to have on here at some point as well. I haven't given him a proper introduction here, but we'll get to that at some other time. But Juliana told me that you used to be a psychologist or a psychiatrist.
Psychologist, yeah.
Okay. What was that about? Was that during a life-filling, frantic time? What was that like? So
when I graduated from college, I promptly fell off a balcony and broke my neck. So my career goal shifted in a really healthy way, because I always had a yearning to give back and make the world a better place. But as a young man, I thought, first make a fortune and then shower the world with, cash or gifts or create a foundation or something. I just had a young man's perspective of life. So that was in the forefront of my mind, which is like, go be successful in the material world. And, but always, give back was definitely the idea, but certainly have a good time and, saturate my ego and ego stuff, it's like, so, and I think it was age appropriate. I'm not, no judgment of my younger self, but when I had my injury, I realized, as people do, that you never know if the next day is guaranteed or not. And it was a life or death, kind of injury at the time. And, so I realized that, like breath, every day needs to encapsulate what you want to do in your life. So, you look over an 80, 90-year-old, lifespan, and each day in those 80 or 90, if you have 80 or 90 years, each day should encapsulate what you do with those 80 or 90 years. So, in each day, I want to work. I enjoy my work, and I also want to give back. So I don't want to work all day and forget to give back, or stress out all day and forget to love. So I just try and every day try and make it a representation of who I am. Mm-hmm. And I forgot the question.
So that led you to becoming a psychologist? Oh. What were you in college for to begin with?
So when I was in college, initially I wanted to be an orthodontist like my father.
It's good money.
Yeah, exactly. Creating more smiles. But I didn't know. I was always artistic. I was always a team player. I was always active, engaged, loved learning. So, and I don't think I allowed myself to ask myself the question, what's your passion? So, and when you're young, what do you know? So, I always enjoyed art, but I didn't necessarily want to just do paintings or sculpture. So, fast forward, I go through college. I studied English and comparative literature. I moved to France for a few years and studied at the Sorbonne in Paris. And
Wow.
then I studied at Oxford in England for a little while, studying literature. And then I came back to the States, graduated, had my injury, and thought, what kind of career could I have using a wheelchair? And what was I interested in? And two things that came to mind were architecture and psychology. And so I studied architecture briefly, loved it, but realized that I was happy giving an architect an idea and working with an architect, but I didn't have to be the architect. Mm-hmm. And then, so I hopped over to psychology. And really, psychology seemed to check all the boxes mm-hmm. of what I wanted to do in life. And being the youngest of 5, I was always curious, watching the lies that happen in a household. Right. Where someone says, oh, yeah, no, I didn't drink that beer. And you just saw them drinking that beer. So you're like, what's that all about? And it's like, oh, you don't want to get killed by dad, And so you start figuring out how people negotiate their family and how they negotiate the world. And so those, something like sneaking a beer is one thing, but when you see people's souls start to shrivel because they don't say who they are because they're afraid of judgment in a family, it's a different dynamic. And I thought I would really like to put myself in a place, as I was as the youngest of 5, of observing the dynamics and letting people realize that they can come back to the mouth of the river and decide, hey, maybe I swam up a stream that wasn't for me. Maybe I can come back to source and go up a river that's truly my calling. And so I think it was informed by my position in my family, but also my own struggles with trying to understand what life is and who I am and what I want to make of it. Mm-hmm. So it's really fulfilling for me to listen to someone else and in that process really open my heart and be a mirror for another person. And it's really a beautiful thing. It doesn't always happen in the time of working with another person, but it's a beautiful thing to see someone discover themselves in front of your eyes.
Right. Yeah, that's people harvesting.
Mm-hmm.
It's cultivating people.
Mm-hmm.
And what led you away from that? You had, I would assume that kind of led into experiences with the newer forms of healing, the human potential.
Mm-hmm. So studying psychology, to be honest with you, I didn't know anything at the time of graduation that I didn't know before beginning graduate school. Mm-hmm. But you are affirmed and you do learn theory and you do learn better practices. But I think innately you're good at something or you're not.
Right.
So you can take 100 hours of coursework and it doesn't make you any better at that thing. Right. But you are aware of some
practices. Better informed. Yeah.
Yeah. But I felt sorry for future patients of classmates of mine because they just don't innately, they are not a psychologist.
Right.
And so they're studying something that they're just not meant to be.
Right.
And I think we've all experienced that. I mean, how many of us have had a bad haircut in our lives? Like somebody that just shouldn't be a barber, or a hairdresser, but they went to school for it. And all of their poor clients who end up looking ridiculous. And there are a lot of poor clients that see counselors who come out feeling ridiculous because the counselor is imposing their thoughts rather than helping that individual find out who they are uniquely themselves. Right. So I think kind of like someone who cuts hair, once you have gone into a field like psychology, you never stop. And I don't think you ever, even though you might not have a pair of scissors in your hand, you're probably sitting in a cafe thinking, God, I wish I could cut that person's hair. They look so much better if they just did X, Y, Z. And I think as a psychologist, you always think like, God, I see someone who is full of so much potential and they're stumbling, or they're wearing a straitjacket. I wish I could just kind of undo the strap so they can move their arms more freely. Mm-hmm. And usually it's people, let's say not usually, I think all the time, we can find ourselves and we don't allow ourselves to be fully expressed. And usually that happens because we're afraid of judgment, and we're afraid of the repercussions of judgment and societal pressures and societal norms. So I like to encourage people to fly their freak flag to high mast, let it blow in the wind. And because if we're all expressing ourselves as our unique essence, it's like looking at a garden of wildflowers. It's spectacular, and the nuances and the shapes and the colors and the perfume and the insects that come to those gardens. I mean, the whole picture is so stunning. And for a world where everybody goes, no, it should just be daisies. We just want all daisies, all uniform, and all. No, I mean, that's just not beauty. First of all, it's just not the way the cosmos works, not the way the earth works. So
right.
If we can, and if we're brave enough to be our unique self and speak our truth, I think the world's a better place. So I want to be at a place where, first of all, do it for myself. It's very easy to talk about other people and help other people with their stuff. But I think the biggest challenge was, hey, take a look in the mirror, man. It's like, do you know who you are, and what are you holding back on? Mm-hmm. And what do you want for your own life? And I think that's my challenge. And I think ultimately everybody's challenge, if they want to. I think a lot of people are not interested in self-expression, but if you are, I say go for it.
It is kind of a bodhisattva. I'm going to help people around me, and I'm going to push them toward that thing, even if it's very sly, thinking around them like a psychologist would. Like, here's a door. I'm not going to tell you this is what I think that you should do, or I'm just going to show you that the door's there, and so that because I think everybody's curious. I don't know if everybody's brave, but I think people have the potential to be brave. And if you can bolster them, like you seem to do well, to be brave in that sense, and to take the breath and look at yourself and evaluate in a not scary way, that opens up to people the possibility of being brave in the face of that, in the face of themselves and the darkness and the pain that they've had to deal with, instead of having to be brave, for example, in a civilization that has lost its mind because people aren't doing that. People will wait. They'll keep both at arm's length, for stasis' sake. Mm-hmm. They'll hide from themselves, and then they'll think that, I would never be a Nazi. Like, if 99 people around me were Nazis, I wouldn't be one, but they, they're never put in a position where they're having to be tested either way. And giving people the door, or just the knowledge of the door in that direction, is sometimes enough. If you do it warm and you do it with them in mind, not like you're trying to play mind games with them, what do you think the most, if you want to talk about it, what do you think the most profound experience you've had with doing that is for someone, opening that, you say you want to take the straitjacket off of people, or even just loosen the straps a little bit. Is there a particularly profound time that you did that, or something, it's all miraculous but extraordinary happened?
I would say it's the times that I run into someone maybe 10 years after we've had discussions that they'll say to me, you changed my life for the better. And, my response is, I didn't. You changed your own life. But what they're saying is that the conversation we had and being in a room with another person who's unconditionally loving them allows them to create that unconditional love for themselves in their own heart.
Right.
Which they may never have been introduced to, frankly.
Right. Like you were saying with the bride and groom, nobody ever just said that or had the courage to say that. You asking your friend from California, what did you ask her? I don't know. You ask questions. You ask deep questions just because you want to know and you're genuinely interested. You asked her what her foundation was. People don't go, not many people go around just talking that way to people that they know. There's so easy to just be casual and not dig into any of that because you don't want to be vulnerable. You don't want to, you're busy or whatever. That's incredibly special.
And that was not the world that I was raised in. So I was raised in a pretty conservative world, I would say. And my parents felt, they wanted us to be educated to the highest level that we could be. And I know they wanted that for us. I don't think they knew exactly where that was going to go. So my oldest brother, who's 11 years older than me, he was like right in the heart of the 60s. And my parents were concerned in our town that we were growing up in that my brother might, just get caught up in a movement that they didn't understand. And so they sent him to a boarding school in Rhode Island that was a Benedictine monastery run by Benedictine monks.
Wow.
And had a great reputation, and they thought it was a good school. So, and it was a great school. As it turned out, they sent all 4 of us boys there. It was an all boys school. So my sister went to another school, but, and it was a great education, and it was interesting. It was a great education because we were around people who were opening our minds. There wasn't anything there that you could learn that you can't learn out of any library. But the men who chose a life of being a monk offered a new perspective that we didn't have in the suburbs. And it was really to push yourself to be analytical and to make your own decisions. And basically, it was an invitation for the first time in my life to step off the gerbil wheel.
Yeah.
And I didn't even know I was on a gerbil wheel. So when we went there and we were encouraged to think for ourselves, it was very disorienting. And then you realize that's the foundation of who you are, is when you realize, when you start doing the work of thinking for yourself, and not just adopting other people's views and taking stances or taking sides, but just say, hey, I'm going to figure this out for me. So I think that as young people, really at any time in your life, but the younger you are, if you have someone come into your life and say, take some time for yourself, ignore all of the wishes and prevailing ways of thought in your society, just put that aside for a little while and have some quiet time and really just let your mind go. It's, what are you feeling? What are you thinking? What are your turn-ons? What excites you? What's scary to you? What are you most fearful of? And feel those things out. And yes, things are bubbling to the surface. And you're like, oh my gosh, am I brave enough to go be that I really am? Or should I wear a mask? And it's perfectly fine to make any choice you want to make. I think the cosmos, the universe, God is actually very passive. It's almost like a blank canvas and a set of paints. And your life is a piece of art that you can create. It is not a paint by numbers. And if you happen to get a canvas that has a paint by numbers, I don't know if you're familiar with that, but growing up, it was popular to have this like canvas that you could buy with the group paints, and then there was an outline of like a ship in a harbor in some New England scene, and you could color in all of the ones with white and all of the twos with gray and all of the threes with red. And if you did everything by the numbers, you would end up with a picture that looks just like what was on the box that you bought it in.
A pretty blocky picture with no shading or any expression in it. Yeah.
And there was a sense of fulfillment that's like, oh my gosh, I followed the rules and I came up with a piece of art that looks exactly like the cover of the box. And it was a sense of like, I did that and I'm an artist. Well, I think anybody in their right mind after, you're 10 years old would say, you're not an artist. You just followed the rules.
Right.
An artist is something altogether different. And great artists are people that push the envelope and create something or make us feel or think something that we have never thought or felt before. And a lot of times with those pieces of art, people look at it and say, well, I could have done that. Well, you didn't.
Right.
Someone else drew a line across a massive canvas and left it at that and called it art. And it made you think or feel something. And so, when all is said and done, we get to step back and look at our artwork that we call our life. And I want mine to be something that I appreciate. If all of our lives were a book in a library, at this point, I'd really like to read my book.
Oh, yeah.
But when I was younger, it just looked like any other book.
Yeah.
But now it's something that I find intriguing, not in a egomaniacal way, but just in a way that I'm lost, I'm curious, I reach out for help. I know I'm incredibly vulnerable and I see the beauty in that. I used to feel like that was a fault, but yeah.
It's exploration.
Yeah, and the tenderness of it. As a male in American society, there was a feeling that you should be like a piece of twisted steel, both inside and outside. And now I really find the beauty is in vulnerability, and that we actually bond with one another through our vulnerabilities.
Yeah, and our enthusiasms and our passions. And that's one of the first things that gets shut down in a kid is their enthusiasm. And that's something that I've had to fight to get back, the ability to like, I'm happy with you, though. Welcome. Hi, I'm happy to see you. That kind of thing. It's like,
yeah,
because it was so, everything became so base level very quickly.
Yes.
And that is, yeah. We're getting up on 3:00. I want to take maybe 10 or 15 minutes and go over spooky, esoteric stuff for the people that hung around till the end.
Yeah.
I don't know if you want to talk about Unity or the secret arabesque pleasure chamber just yet. We could update people on that in the future. That will be edited out if you like. But I do want to ask what your most absurd, high flying, pie in the sky hopes are for Birmingham and for what you want to continue to do. If you could do anything, what would you want? And what is the strangest thing that you've ever experienced or been a part of or seen?
Well, what I hope for Birmingham or wherever I am, I like that phrase, bloom where you're planted. And here I am in Birmingham, is to be fully expressed. So I have a spiritual name for myself, which is Ardan, Ardan. And the meaning of it is unfolding in love consciousness. And what that means is, first of all, I asked my parents at one time in my life, where'd you get the name Bob? Mm-hmm. Is it a saint? And they're like, God, honey, I hate to tell you, but I don't even know. I'm like, you brought me into this world and you name me and there's like no meaning. There's no like deep, like Aramaic. I mean, there's like, is there anything to this?
Yeah.
And they're like,
Grandpa Robert or what?
They're like, yeah. I think, you're the fifth kid. I think we just kind of liked it, And so after being like devastated that my parents had no creative or spiritual or intellectual attachment to my name, I decided to come up with my own name. And so, but I wanted it to be a name that came from who I originally, the family that I was birthed into. So it's the sound R is from my name Robert, and Dan comes from my middle name Daniel. So Arden together is, it's from where I am, it's from who I am, but together it is transformative for me. And so when I gave it the meaning, unfolding in love consciousness, that's just my greatest version, a distilled version of my understanding of life, which is I do not understand anything. I don't understand this microphone. I don't understand my ability to perceive you or understand me or the oneness that we all are. I really don't understand. I'm trying to every day, but I just feel like I'm unfolding, kind of like a flower that's blossoming. And so when I think of the name Arden, I think in my heart almost like a rose that's continuing to blossom and pushing out new petals from the inner space of the flower. And that I'm just unfolding in the consciousness of love. And so whatever this cosmic, wild, magical mystery tour that we're on, I'm just, open eyes, open heart, open ears, just continually trying to figure it out, continually, just kind of pushing out from that space. So what I've come to in my life now is that, yes, I want to come from kindness and love, but I also want people to delve deep into their sensuality, like understand their body, understand every inch of their body, from their toes to the top follicle on the top of their hair, to be fully in this human body. And I think we're given a very paint by numbers version of what it is to be male or female or intersexed or sensual. Or sensual. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's like, what does all of that mean? And there's so many wonderful exercises that people can do. But first of all, just open up the door and allow yourself to get a little freaky. Right. It's not that interesting and I think too often, as I said earlier, you're either growing together or you're growing apart in relationships. Well, that can happen with yourself. I mean, you can get so bored of putting your leg into the same pair of pants every day or pulling on the same skirt every day or, and just going through the motions. It's like, do something a little crazy, shave a part of your body you haven't shaved before. I actually, speaking of shaving, I had a friend when I met her in college before my injury, and we remained friends after my injury, and she came down to visit me. I was staying at my parents' house after my injury, and my uncle was in the den, and we were having coffee, and his wife and my mother were in the kitchen talking about, they just returned from church. And anyway, my friend's name is Diva. And so Diva is kind of to just give you an image, kind of a cross between Mama Cass and Janis Joplin. And she can sing, and she has long hair and a hippie dress and no bra and wearing Tevas. And she'd call me Baba Rooney. And she came down, and so she's like, "Oh, Baba Rooney, I was at Unity this weekend, and I saw Sparkle," and Sparkle's a mutual friend of ours whose birth name was Sarah. And she's like, Sparkle said, "Diva, come over. You got to check this out." And Diva had remarked on her pink eyebrows and her purple hair. And she said, "Oh my gosh, check this out." And she lifted up her arms, and her armpit hair was dyed yellow. And then she said, "Diva, you got to check this out." And so they just stepped to the side, and she lifted up her hippie dress, and she wasn't wearing underwear, and she had dyed her pubic hair bright red and carved the top of her pubic hair in kind of like two bumps. So her yoni looked like a heart.
Right.
And so anyway, Diva's like, Bob, you have to check this out. And so she lifted up her skirt and I said, wow, well, that brings, new meaning to having an open heart. Anyway, my uncle was so enthralled with Diva telling this story. He's like, tell me another story. And here he is, a guy looking like, Rockefeller with his tie on and his jacket and drinking his cup of coffee. But, whether you've lived a life that's outside the box or you haven't, everybody loves the artist journey of the one that did dare to express themselves, that did have lovers and did have artwork that they crumbled up and threw to the side that probably could have been hung in a museum somewhere. But they weren't living for the art to sell at market. They were living for the art itself and expression. So what I'd like to encourage people to do, and sometimes I do it with a wink, is just to encourage people to express a crazy side of themselves. It's okay to be a little crazy.
Yeah. And sometimes that's all you need is a friend to like elbow you just a little bit and nudge you in that direction and in a safe place that feels comforting.
Absolutely. And, the cool thing is in Birmingham, we have so many cool hipster generation people that are, they're combining. Like one of my favorite places in town is Wasabi One's, combining Mexican and sushi, and I mean, who would have thought of that? So
but I love it.
Sometimes I feel like personally you should put your sushi in your Mexican and see how it feels.
Yeah, that's great. So, strangest experience you've ever had, weirdest thing you've ever seen. What was the peak strangeness?
Really the craziest thing, and you might think I'm crazy after saying this, is after my spinal cord injury, I was in the hospital and I was, if you can imagine this, I was laid out on a bed and I had a bolt screwed into either side of my skull, just above my ear on each side, with a horseshoe piece of metal attached from one bolt to the other going over the top of my head. And then at the top of that, there was a pulley and it was attached to a wire that was hanging off the top of my bed. So it was pulling my neck straight off of my shoulders because I had broken my neck and they needed to keep my neck in alignment until they could decide what nerve damage had happened. And the bones also were broken, but they were loose. They hadn't been, there hadn't been any surgery to fix them yet. So you didn't want a bone drifting and cutting off a nerve. And so anyway, there I was in traction and I'm staring at a ceiling. And I really had an overwhelming feeling that I could speak to God. And once again, this was coming from a mind at that age, at 23. And I really felt like, hey, you picked the wrong guy. Like, I'm a nice guy. Like, spinal cord injury. I mean, this should happen to someone who's a mass murderer, not someone who's a decent person.
So where were you emotionally at this point? I mean, that's got to devastate you.
Well, graduating from college, searching, really breaking my neck was like, it was a crazy night. It's just like, what's going on here? Let me figure it out. So emotionally, I was just like, let's just take this moment by moment. What's going on here? I mean, I had broken my leg before. I'd been in hospitals before. So it seemed kind of routine in that way. I got the schema of there are nurses and doctors and fluids and things like that. So I was alone. I was in an emergency clinic, but I was, in a ward and on a bed. So, and there was somebody who had been shot in a drug deal in the bed next to me. And the nurses kept on coming over, to reinsert his tubes because, he was trying to pull his tubes out so he could die. And, so there's that drama going on. And I just said, I really feel like you got the wrong guy. And I had a sense that I might die, and I felt like I was going to heaven. And so again, I have different thoughts about this now, but back then I kind of saw myself almost like a personality, like a truck overloaded with experiences, and almost like, I don't know if you know the Beverly Hillbillies, but the intro is like Granny sitting on top of an old Ford pickup truck with all of this stuff from their farm, and they're riding into Beverly Hills. So it was that type of, and Granny was like on a rocking chair on top of all the crap in the back of the truck, and smoking a pipe, I think. So in any case, I thought, oh, this is it. I'm going to heaven, and it's filled with all of these experiences I've had. And then I got this feeling, no, it's not that. And then I had, my next thought was that it was almost like I was like when you see a previous homicide on a street and they've outlined where the body was in chalk. It almost felt like that, like I was an outline on this bed, but that I was not my body. I was something other than my body. And at 23, really, what do you know besides your body? So I was like, whoa, I'm not my body. And then I had this feeling that everything I had created in those 3 years of my life was in a little brown paper bag, and I was holding it in my right hand. And I thought, oh my God, the difference of going from a car loaded with personality and experiences to a little humble brown paper bag, a lunch bag. And my mind said, take a look inside. And so in my mind's eye, I opened up the bag and I looked inside, and it was empty. And my heart stopped. I thought, my God, have I lived a life in vain? Was there nothing that I had accomplished or offered? And I could feel a tear coming down the side of my face, even though I was in traction and I couldn't wipe it away. And I thought, my God, how could I have wasted a life that I was given? And then my mind said, take a look again. And so I looked back in the bag, and it still looked like it was empty, but it was like little sparks, almost like when you close your eyes and your nerves in your eye are sparking like little things of light. And it was almost like fireflies in a bag in a summer night. And my mind said, what's in there is the love that you've created among your family and friends, and that's what you'll be taking with you. And I felt like I was going on a journey, and in some way this love was almost like fuel to bring me to my next dimension. And then I felt more tears come down the side of my cheeks, and I thought, I think I'm losing my mind. I've never had thoughts like this before, and it was, terrifying. And so at that point, I said out loud, God, I want to talk with you. I really need to talk with you. And I felt like I could reach out, almost like right now in this room. I almost felt like I could reach out and pull a corner of this screen, this illusion, and I could pull it back, and God will have always been there right in front of my face, but it will have been perceived as it was a hospital room, or almost like in Oz, just pulling back the curtain and talking with the man behind the curtain. And anyway, the freaky thing is I heard a voice, and this voice said to me, Robert, you shall not regain your physical well-being until you come to a higher self-understanding. And I said, what? Like, it was very strange. It was as if someone was announcing over a loudspeaker, please, with the person with the Alabama license plate, move their car. It wasn't like in my head. The previous conversation was in my head.
Yeah.
And this was something I was hearing. And it was like about 6 feet above my head. It was between my head and the ceiling of the hospital, which had really tall ceilings. And I said, what? And I remember feeling that I didn't expect this voice to return. But it did. And it said, you must love everyone and everything. And that was the last I ever heard of a voice. And I remember thinking initially, I don't think I can do that, because I didn't love my brother-in-law. My sister had just gotten married. She's my best friend, and I was a young kid. And I was like, what do you mean you're taking my best friend from me? So I was struggling with those type of issues, but I don't care if you hear it, or if you read it on the back of a Cracker Jack box or in a fortune cookie. If you get a message and it resonates with you, then that's a message that resonates with you. And so that's always been my mantra from then on, is to go through life, and even in difficult times, to see the love that we're saturated in every moment, especially for those of us that have eyes that can see, or ears that can hear, or bodies that can feel things. It's like whatever we're experiencing is so exquisite and beyond any of our ability to understand it all, and to just be with that. And now, fast forward 30 plus years, I look at this world, and I reflect on those words, and I think my higher self understanding is not the self of the body that has been given this name Bob by my parents, but it's the self of, I'm an aspect of the entire cosmos, and it is an aspect of me, and we are one and flowing together, and really are eternal, and each one of us is an essence of this greater love. But it's very present in our own mind, in this cluster of nerves in our brain. Our neurology is each one of us is the center of the universe in our self-understanding. So it's really incumbent upon all of us to go big, go expand beyond what your initial introduction to this world was. And we were talking about conservative versus liberal, but, often parents want their children to be safe and cared for, which is a very loving wish. But it's really not until we're endangered do we actually come alive. Mm-hmm. It's not until we die unto our physical self that we live in a perspective that's beyond our physical self. So what I really wish for everyone, and it's not uncommon, I think, for most people that have lived a long life, they really wish for people that they push to be expansive. And one thing that a lot of people over 80, if they're asked, what do they wish they changed in their life? Often they will say, I wish I had a major challenge in my life, which is not something as a young person you wish for. You wish, God, please don't give me anything that's too challenging.
Right.
I want an easy life. I want a comfortable life. But the truth is that the lives that are fullest are the ones that have been tested the most. So that's my freakiest thing, is hearing voices and connecting with the cosmos.
That's beautiful. I think that's the best place we could possibly end. Thank you for your time, and thank you for spending an hour with me, paying attention to that and all those things.
Thank you. And I love you. And a lot of times when I say I love you to people, I feel like people are like, you don't know me. How can you love me? But I just start in love. Like in my classroom, you start with an A+. You have to work really hard to get a C.
Right.
So I love who you are. I love this opportunity. And I love that you're a reflection of me and I'm a reflection of you. It's been a really special time.
Thank you. You too. If you want a wedding, host it in the most beautiful place you could think of. Is there a link? I'll put links in the thing. How do you go about booking?
Clubhouse on Highland at gmail.com.
Beautiful. You'll hear music next. And this has been the Earth Hotel. Thank you so much.
What fun.
Isn't that great?